Hi everyone, and welcome once again to our webinar. This is Kunal, your host for the evening, and we have some exciting agenda lined up for you, which will start shortly. In fact, it's again a very special day to do the webinar. So, 4 years back, the first article on Analytics Vidya went live tonight. So I would have been probably writing the first article which went on the site. So the publishing date is of 20th of April. So good to see you all back. Good to have you here, and we have some exciting agenda planned for the evening. Let me quickly come to the agenda. So the session today is on role of Spark in big data and analytics, and we have Durga Gadiraju, who is founder of ITversity, who would be taking this session. Just to introduce Durga, I mean, it's always heartening to come across people who share the same passion and the same kind of spirit of evangelizing a particular subject. And Durga is one of the persons who shares the same passion about analytics and big data as I do, and that's how I came across him. So Durga runs a platform called ITversity, which aims to kind of provide big data education in a very effective manner. And he has also set up a very interesting platform, which he would tell probably a bit more details on, where you can set up your own labs and you don't need to do your installation. So the lab is on the cloud. So he'll tell you probably more details later as we talk. And before starting ITversity, he had 13 years of experience in IT and various big data architectures. He has worked with several companies like AT&T and Citi. So pleasure to have Durga here. And as you would know, this webinar is happening as part of DataFest 2017. The DataFest started on 1st of April. It's in full swing tonight. So actually we start. So we just finished the data hack hour last hour. We are starting this webinar, and we'll be starting the machine learning hackathon in a few hours from now. So the next 4 days are going to be very intense for the community, and then we hope to see you there in the machine learning competition. It's again a very specific, very interesting competition. So if you know machine learning, you should definitely come and check out the machine learning competition going live shortly. So you would probably know all of this by now. So there are various competitions happening with cash prizes of more than $10,000, which we are giving away during April. If you have not seen the leaderboards, go check them out tonight, and then make sure you participate in the hackathon. With that, let me bring Durga on as a panelist. And so just give me a minute. I'll bring Durga as the panelist for the session. Hi, Durga.
Can you hear me, Kunal?
Yeah, Durga, we can hear you. Welcome on board, and thanks for doing this session for our community. I think it's a very interesting session, and then we have some hands-on demo lined up. So I won't take any further minute, and I'll pass on the controls to you. So you can start. But thanks a lot for doing this session for the community.
Sure. I'll be honored to take this session on your platform, Kunal.
Sure. There is, I think, a slight distraction coming when you're speaking. So that's the only. Sure.
How is it now? Is it okay? Or,
Yeah, now it's better. Yeah, now it's better. You can start.
Okay.
Sure. So, Durga, you can start your session.
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen.
Sure.
I hope everyone can see the screen now.
Yeah, Durga, we can see your screen.
Okay. So, as part of this 1 hour, I'll be talking about big data ecosystem, overview about Spark, and and there will be a brief demo, and I will be covering both Scala as well as Python. How we can use programming languages to utilize the Spark, the power of Spark to process the data at scale. And then we will have Q&A. And as part of the demo, as Kunal was saying, I will be covering the lab. I will give overview about the lab also as part of the demo. Okay. So already he introduced about me, and our platform consists of all these different websites as well as YouTube channel. So youtube.itversity is the channel name, and there's tons of content on big data. You are feel free to visit the website and channel and start learning more about big data content what we have. Okay, and then we have website, a forums, and also the labs, which I'll be covering in detail towards the end of the session. So you might have heard about big data, and when it comes to big data, there are vast array of technologies, something like this. You might have heard about HDFS, MapReduce, Yarn, Kafka, Flume, S3, Blob, Impala, Zookeeper, and you might be overwhelmed with all these different terms. So most of these things are very minute components, and there are very few technologies which you need to master as part of the foundation to get into big data. So before getting into that, let us understand the several categories we have, and um, uh, set, uh, let us understand the category of all these technologies. Okay. So first, I will start with high-level categories. You have a file system. So if you're familiar with computers, everything has to be persisted as part of the file system. Like in your computer, you will have hard disk, and you will have different types of file system which is supported on these personal computers such as laptops. When it comes to big data, also there are file systems where we will dump all the files, and we will understand all those file systems a little bit later when we dig into the details of what all different file systems we have. So once we have the file system, we have to copy the data before we start processing. And the category which will get data into the big data ecosystem is called as data ingestion. Once data is ingested, we have to process the data. So for Harshit, the voice is not audible. I don't know. Is it audible, Kunal, for you?
Yeah, Durga, it is audible. So you can continue. I think there might be a slight lag or something at his end, but I'm able to hear you clearly.
Okay, sure. So so data processing can be done in batch, in real time, and in streaming also. So we'll understand what all different technologies that fall under batch, real time, as streaming as we dig into details of the data processing category. And then there is visualization. Visualization is very important. No matter how much effort you put to get the data into the file system using several data ingestion technologies and process the data. Without visualization, you can get much value out of all that effort. So one of the categories is visualization, and then a set of tools which will facilitate the supporting the overall ecosystem. So at a very high level, we have these categories: file system, data ingestion, processing, visualization, and support. Now let us get into the details. But before getting into the details, let us understand a bird's eye view of all these categories. We have file system at the bottom, and then we have data ingestion technologies, data processing technologies, visualization. Support will provide the support of all these technologies, and then we will try to get the insights using the visualization tool. Sometimes we might even get insights directly from the data. Okay, so insights is very top layer. Once the data is processed, we can actually uh, uh, perform the analytics or analyze the data and get insights. And we'll try to map the technologies which we have covered earlier into this picture. So by the end of this, or by the half of this session, all these technologies will be mapped to this slide. Okay, we'll get into that little bit later. Okay. Yeah. Now comes file system. File system supporting big data should be typically distributed file systems. However, there are cloud-based storages, and we will see what are those cloud-based storages. So the distributed file system is called as SDFS, which comes under and then the most popular cloud-based storages are Amazon's S3 and then Azure Blob. Okay. So typically, these two technologies, such as AWS S3 and Azure Blob, are used as part of the pay-as-you-go model. So using pay-as-you-go model, if you bring up the cluster whenever you want and process the data, and then terminate the cluster, the cost will be very minimal. You can keep the cost to bare minimal. I will give an example here. One in the project which I have worked for a leading sound systems company. When I say sound system, the audio systems in the car, and we get a lot of data from these audio systems, and we want to analyze the data about the Bluetooth failures and other types of failures from those systems. So to analyze the data, we don't need to perform that analysis all the time. Once in a day, we get data all the vehicles, and the data is stored in S3, and then we use AWS EMR, Elastic MapReduce, which is kind of technologies which facilitate us data processing. And instead of having the cluster all the time and running all the time, we just bring up the cluster for 1 hour, and we process the data, and the processed data will again go back to S3. So by doing this, we end up spending around $2,000 to $3,000 per month. And if we have to have a dedicated cluster for that project, we might end up spending at least a couple of millions of dollars as capex as part of the initial investment. And then even the maintenance costs are very high, and we cut down that cost quite significantly by leveraging the pay-as-you-go model. So the bottom line is, using S3 or Blob, you can leverage the cloud pay-as-you-go model, and you can cut down the cost. But at the same time, the performance might not be as optimal as in with HDFS or having the dedicated cluster. Anyway, the main takeaway from this slide is there are several types of file systems which are typically used as part of the big data ecosystem, and they are HDFS, AWS, S3, and Azure Blob. There are other technologies also, but these are more popular. And then the data ingestion.
Just a quick check. In case you can move slightly closer to the Wi-Fi signal, I think the voice is kind of oscillating slightly at times. So if it is possible to kind of move closer to your signal, that would be helpful. We are able to get, but it just breaks a bit in between.
How is it now? Is it better?
Yeah, it's much better. Much better.
Okay. So now I'm talking about data ingestion. Data ingestion can be done either in real time or in batches. and there are several data sources from where we can ingest the data into the big data ecosystem. And typically the data will be persisted in the file systems which I have covered earlier, but whatever technologies I'm talking about now as part of this slide are the ones which are used to get data into the file system. If you have to get data from relational databases such as Oracle, MySQL, Postgres, those are the most popular relational databases along with DB2, SQL Server, etc. If you have to get data from relational databases, one of the approach is to use Scoop. It's a MapReduce based tool which can connect to the source databases using JDBC and get the data into the big data file systems. And then if you have to get data in real time or in near real time from web servers, and in that scenario where the data is being logged into web server logs, if we have to get data, we can use a technology called Flume or Kafka. Okay, so these are the technologies which are used to capture data in real time by reading data from the web server logs. So if you want, if you have a already existing application and if you just want to pull the data from the web server logs without modifying your application code, Flume is the technology which you can use. But in case if you are starting a new application, or if you don't mind refactoring your application code to push the data into some queue mechanism which is called as Kafka, you can get data in real time using push approach. So Flume is primarily used for pull, and Kafka is primarily used for push. And Kafka is a lot more reliable and distributed technology to queue up the data and process using some downstream technologies. Hence, sometimes even though we don't want to change the code, we complement Flume and Kafka together and try to get data in more reliable fashion. In short, if you want to get data in real time from web server logs, either you can use Flume or Kafka, or you can complement each other and use both in some of the use cases. And we can get data in real time into the big data ecosystem. And also there are many other tools, and sometimes we also have to customize as per our requirements. Okay, and some of the tools are Golden Gate or SharePlex. If you are familiar with database technologies, you might have heard about Golden Gate or SharePlex, where we can capture data in real time from the databases. Flume and Kafka, we can capture data in real time from web server or application server logs. Okay, but sometimes we might have to capture data in real time from the databases also. Scoop we cannot use. Scoop is primarily a MapReduce based, and it is primarily a batch processing technology. But if you want to get data in real time from the database directly, we can use technologies like Golden Gate, SharePlex, etc. And sometimes we also have to come up with customized solutions to get data from whatever source we have and dump into the big data ecosystem file systems, which are HDFS or Azure Blob or Amazon S3. Okay, and then data processing. As I have mentioned earlier, we can subcategorize data processing into batch, real time, or streaming. Okay, and when it comes to batch, we use MapReduce or Spark. So both are primarily batch processing technologies, but MapReduce is IO driven, so the performance is a little bit on slower side. Spark is memory driven. Performance can be at its best, but it is memory intensive and it requires a lot more resources than MapReduce based technologies. Okay. And then if you want to process or if you want to process data in real time, either sometimes we just want to perform ad hoc querying or ad hoc reports. Okay, and we can use any technology like Tableau, ClickView, which are conventional DA tools or visualization tools, as well as um, uh, technologies such as Impala, Presto, Spark SQL, and we can actually perform ad hoc querying in real time. If you try to use MapReduce based technologies such as Hive, etc., the and if you try to perform ad hoc reporting, then the performance will be very poor. For that reason, we use technologies such as Impala, Presto, Spark SQL, and each of them have drivers, and you can connect the tools such as Tableau using those drivers and perform the ad hoc reporting. So in this case, when we say ad hoc querying, we are just reading data in real time from the file system. Okay, but sometimes we might have to write data in real time and also read data in real time. So in those scenarios, we can use NoSQL databases, and NoSQL databases are HBase, MongoDB, Cassandra, etc. It seems people are asking questions. We will take the questions towards the end of the session. Okay, Kunal had okay. I can take this question a little bit later. Okay.
Yeah, Durga, you can continue.
Yeah, and then there is streaming technologies. So the difference between real-time technologies and streaming technologies are, real-time means it should happen immediately. Okay, but streaming means there can be a little bit latency. When it comes to batch, the latency can be as much as 8 hours, whereas when it comes to streaming, typically it's kind of micro batches. In some extreme scenarios, we batch data for 2 minutes and we process the data every 2 minutes. So the latency will be only 2 minutes. I will give okay. So now I will start with streaming technologies.
Yeah,
So
I think there is just one question, that why Spark Batch in Mongo real time? I think that's one question which 2-3 people are asking. If you want to take it now, or we can take it later, depending on how you want.
yeah, so Spark is primarily a so when I say Spark, you can see Spark in batch as well as in real time. But in real time, it is part of ad hoc querying using module called Spark SQL. Okay, we typically don't write into Spark based so Spark is not a database. Okay, Spark is just a distributed computing engine. Okay, and here using Spark, we are not going to store data anywhere. But there is a wrapper called Spark SQL which can get data in real time as part of ad hoc reporting or querying. Okay, but if you want to store data in real time, the underlying database has to support something called CRUD operations: create, read, update, and delete. You might have heard about insert, update, delete statements, right? So as part of Spark, you don't see insert, update, or delete, or variations of insert, update, and delete. You need to have those features to consider a complete real-time operation-based system. And as part of the entire big data ecosystem, the NoSQL ecosystem will cover that. And the NoSQL ecosystem are HBase, MongoDB, Cassandra. And now I will give a couple of use cases, and then I will explain which technology will fit where. Okay, so I'm opening a browser, and I'm going to LinkedIn. Okay, LinkedIn is a very general example, and any professional these days is using LinkedIn. So I consider it as a perfect example to explain all these things together. So here, if you go to profile, okay, you will see something called endorsements, right? So you see this endorsement. Let's say someone endorsed me, and that endorsement has to be saved immediately into the database. So it's kind of a real-time operation. And when it comes to these real-time operations, they are not sophisticated transactions like debiting money from one account and crediting to another account. Hence, instead of using relational database to store this information, if we can store this in NoSQL databases such as HBase, Cassandra, MongoDB, etc., the scalability to support millions of users and then endorsements for those millions of users is very high compared to relational databases. Hence, to store these endorsements, we typically use NoSQL databases such as HBase, Cassandra, MongoDB, etc. And LinkedIn uses their own proprietary NoSQL database to store this information. And then if people endorse me, let's say there are 100 people as part of this session, and if all the 100 people endorsed me, and if 100 first candidate try to see my profile, the report need not be up to date immediately. So for example, if all of you endorsed me on several technologies, if someone is trying to see the report, the report might not be updated in very real time. Okay, and there is no harm even if you take 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes to update this report. There is not much harm to it, right? So in that context, the streaming technologies such as Spark Streaming, Flink, Storm, you can use one of these technologies. We capture data using the data ingestion tools. And when it comes to ingesting data in real time, we use technologies such as Flume, Kafka, etc. And LinkedIn uses Kafka. So we can actually push data to web server logs and from web server logs to Kafka queue. And from Kafka queue, we can integrate with technologies such as Spark Streaming or Flink or Storm and process the data. Once the data is processed, which means that let's say they queue up to 2 minutes, and whatever endorsements I and other folks in LinkedIn get, those the report has to be updated every 2 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it is. So these technologies, Spark Streaming, Flink, Storm, can be used to add to the existing report. And if you see here, the report is not from the raw data. The report is from the aggregated data. And if as LinkedIn has millions of users, and if people at least thousands of profiles will be seen at peak at a given point in time. And if it has to support all the thousands of users, and if the report has to be faster, the data has to be pre-computed or pre-aggregated, right? Otherwise, it has to get the data, group the data, aggregate it, and it has to generate the report. And generating this report can take time. So to cut down the processing effort at request time while someone viewing the report, every 2 minutes using those streaming technologies, we'll update, we will aggregate and update a table which will have pre-aggregated data. And when someone visits my profile, the visualization happen again from a NoSQL database, which is HBase, Cassandra, or MongoDB, and then the report will be rendered faster. And if you are very familiar with endorsements, every day or every 2 days or every week, people get kind of a newsletter, right? And it will say, okay, you are endorsed in these technologies over a period of time. It could be 1 week or 1 day, whatever the SLAs are. And that is completely offline and batch. So once in every day, it will try to aggregate, or once in every week, it will try to aggregate the technologies that are endorsed for all those professionals endorsed in that period of time, and they will get the report. So it's a classic batch processing example. In that case, you can use either MapReduce based solution or Spark based solution, depending upon the volume and the pace at which data needs to be processed. You can either use MapReduce or Spark, which will aggregate the data and send a newsletter kind of email to you saying that, okay, you are endorsed in all these technologies by these folks. And um, uh, and in that scenario, they use MapReduce or Spark-based technologies to process the data. And file systems are the ones which will actually store the data. And when I covered the file system, right, I only covered HDFS, S3, and Blob. On top of these things, most of the NoSQL database have their own file system. Okay, for example, Cassandra have something called Cassandra file system. MongoDB have their own file system. Okay, depending upon the technology you are using, there are other file systems also which come to play. Okay, and I will take another example. It is limited to streaming itself. So there is Walmart, right? Walmart is a brick and mortar store, or a brick and mortar, and also they have e-commerce platform. So one use case is, if someone searches for a product in their website, if you live in US, you will understand this very quickly. So you visit Walmart website and you try to you try to buy a product. There are shipping options. Shipping can be done to your home or to nearby store. Okay, and and Walmart have 4,500 stores globally, and most of the stores are in US itself. So when you search for a product, if the product is already available in very nearby store, you can directly go and buy, or you can directly go and pick. So you get the product which is in brick and mortar store at a online price, which is typically cheaper than the store price. And customers might feel happy to go to realize that, okay, I can pick the item which I am looking for as quickly as possible and get at online price, right? So when they start this application about providing the information on the nearby stores having the product which you are looking for, initially they used to get data from the stores once in a day and present the search results by either over reporting or under reporting the product availability in the stores. So let's say you have only six items for the product which you are trying to search in the store. They might say that they have only 2 or 3 online, so that even if it takes some time for this guy to go to the store and pick it up, and if some of the items are sold, still the probability of getting the product is high. However, because the data is not synced in real time, the miss ratio, by the time the guy decided to buy the product and made the payment and go to the store and pick it up, the miss ratio is considerable. It's not very high, but it's considerable. And customers are not very happy to realize that, okay, products are not available by the time they go to the store. So at Walmart, what we have done is, instead of getting data once in a day and provide the search results in an ineffective manner, we actually developed our own streaming application. We get data every 2 minutes about all the products in each of the store, and store the data in real time in a NoSQL database. I think we have used Cassandra at the time. So every 2 minutes, we have a custom application which will query the database about the availability of each of the product and update the NoSQL database. And whenever someone go to the website and try to search for the product, they tend to get the results which are only 2 minutes behind. And the miss ratio, the data available is very accurate, and the miss ratio is also considerably lower compared to the earlier approach, where we get data in batches once in a day and present the search results based on that data. And also, as we are using Cassandra as the database, it is highly scalable, and we are able to get best of the performance compared to traditional real-time database. So again, in that there is no batch processing of the data. It's primarily real-time updating of the products that are available in each of the stores in the Walmart. And for that we have used Cassandra. And for updating this in streaming fashion, we have built a custom application. So I have given two use cases. One is the LinkedIn endorsements, and also and when I talk about LinkedIn endorsements, I try to explain what is done in streaming and what type of databases can be used and what kind of processing can be done in batches. So a newsletter which consolidate information over a period of time and send to all those guys who got endorsed over that period of time is the example given for the data processing in batches. Okay, and Amazon recommendation engine is another classic example. When people buy products in Amazon, they want to apply the machine learning algorithms and try to provide the recommendation based on different affinities. One could be price affinity, another could be category affinity, etc. And for that also they have to process data in batches. So once a day or whatever timeline they decide, they get the data and they try to process, apply these machine learning algorithms, and push the output or port the output into a NoSQL database called DynamoDB. DynamoDB is Amazon's proprietary NoSQL database, and the reports are presented from DynamoDB using custom technologies. Okay, and now comes visualization. As I have mentioned to you earlier, unless you are able to visualize the data, there is no meaning of using all those technologies to get data into the big data ecosystem and then process the data. So one of the technology where you can actually get the data directly from HDFS and perform analytics on top of it is Datameer. Datameer is a licensed product. It is kind of a spreadsheet on top of or Excel on top of big data system, which is HDFS in this case. The underlying file system could be HDFS, and then Datameer have its own data processing layer along with the visualization. And then D3JS, which is a JavaScript based visualization framework. And most of these LinkedIn endorsements, AWS recommendation engine, and if you go to Facebook and if you go to the page analytics, all those things are done using D3JS. They have built custom applications using D3JS, which is nothing but a JavaScript based visualization framework. And we can use Tableau, QlikView, and also technologies like R, Python also have rudimentary or basic visualization techniques. You can use that also to visualize the data. Okay, now the support, the fifth category is support. There are a bunch of tools which are used to support the clusters. It could be something called Ambari, Cloudera Manager, Ganglia. As given the audience are primarily from data background, either they are data engineers or data scientists, you don't need to worry too much about support. When it comes to people like big data administrators, they are more focused in this area than the other areas. Okay, so support is primarily to keep your cluster up and running all the time, and also proactively monitor the cluster, and if there are any issues, fix the issues on the cluster. Zookeeper is another technology. Kerberos is for security. Nox or Ranger. All these technologies are primarily to support the cluster. Now, going back to the previous slide, we have these four categories which are useful for the developers. I removed the support deliberately. I will try to map the technologies which I have covered earlier as part of this slide. So when it comes to file system, we have HDFS, we have S3, we have Azure Blob. When it comes to data ingestion, we have Scoop, Flume, Kafka. There can be custom solutions also. When it comes to data processing, because there are several technologies, I just specify the subcategories of data processing such as batch, real-time, streaming. Again, if it is batch, we are talking about MapReduce or Spark. If it is real-time, again real-time have ad hoc reporting or uh, real-time databases. For real-time databases, we use HBase, MongoDB, Cassandra, etc. And for real-time ad hoc reporting, we can use Impala, Impala, Presto, Spark SQL, etc. And then streaming, we have Spark streaming, and Flink and Storm. These are the technologies which we use. And when it comes to visualization, we have Datameer, we have BI tools such as Tableau, QlikView, etc. And there can be custom solutions also based on D3JS. Okay. And what is it when it comes to data science? What is this big data ecosystem when it comes to data science? So data science and big data are two different fields. Okay. Data science is not always on top of huge volumes of data. Sometimes even if you have handful of records, you can apply a data science algorithm and you can get some insights into it. Okay, and data science can be implemented even using Excel on small volumes of data. You don't need to have a big data cluster. But when it comes to larger volumes of data scientist team work closely with data engineers. If it is a very big organization and if there is a data scientist team and data engineers team, data scientist team will drive requirements for the data engineers. They will tell we need so and so data in so and so format, and data engineers will actually get data from different sources using data ingestion technologies, and then they process the data. As part of the processing, they do cleansing of the data, standardization of the data, and aggregations on top of the data. Okay, and then data will be ported to data science algorithms after processing the data, and then data science algorithms can be applied by using big data modules such as Mahout, Spark, MLlib, etc. So sometimes these data science algorithms is implemented by the data scientists on top of data provided by the data engineers. Sometimes data scientists tell that, okay, use this algorithm and give me the processed data, and data engineers should be able to apply those algorithms which are recommended by data scientists, and they will give the already processed data using that algorithm to the data scientist, and data scientist will actually analyze the data and come up with the insights into it. Okay, and in some smaller shops, there is a huge overlap between data scientist and data engineer. A small data scientist and data engineer team has to do everything. But in bigger organizations, those two are highly specialized roles. Data scientists primarily work on the algorithms, which are so they're primarily R&D on the data, and data engineers are the ones who will actually get the data for the data scientists. Okay, so data scientists should know about big data ecosystem, but they need not be hands-on if there is a specialized team. But in case if the role has an overlap between data scientist as well as data engineer, uh, in that case, the data scientist have to understand all these technologies with hands-on expertise, and he should be able to deliver whatever is required for the organization. Okay, and now Apache Spark. So what is Apache Spark? It is primarily a distributed processing framework. If you go back to the category, it comes under data processing category, and it works on almost all the big data file systems such as HDFS, S3, Azure, and also it can actually get data from Cassandra, MongoDB, many other NoSQL database also directly. And you can perform analysis on top of the data, or you can process the data at scale using Spark. There are a bunch of APIs to process the data. So Spark is nothing but bunch of APIs, and they are called as transformations and actions. They are also known as core Spark. Spark is tightly integrated with Scala, Python, Java, R, Most frequently, people use either Scala or Python to process the data when it comes to developing the applications using Spark-based APIs. To be proficient in Spark, the main thing is you should be comfortable with programming, and the programming language can be any of Scala, Python, Java, as well as R, but preferably you should be proficient in Scala or Python. You often hear about Yarn or Mesos. They are just frameworks to run the jobs. Developers do not need to worry too much about it. It's a one-time learning task. You should only know how to submit the job and what are the subtle difference. So in Yarn, then the way you submit the job is almost same as the way you submit the job in Mesos. Only thing is, there are certain arguments called control arguments, which will take different types of values for Yarn and Mesos. As long as a developer you know the difference, it is good enough. About how to the difference you should know is only about how to submit the jobs. Not you don't need to dig deep about Yarn or Mesos. But you often hear about those things. That's why I am highlighting. Okay. And as I have mentioned to you earlier in this slide, the, uh, the foundation of Spark is nothing but bunch of APIs, and those are called as transformations and actions, and these are also called as core Spark. And if you go to this picture, this bottom section which says Apache Spark is nothing but transformations and actions. And on top of those transformations and actions, which are nothing but APIs, we have different modules. You can use Spark SQL to process the data using SQL. So in some cases, you can get insights, or you can process the data using SQL, right? If you can define a structure to the data, and if you are familiar with SQL, you can leverage that, and you can process as well as get insights into it using Spark SQL. To get data in real time and perform analytics on top of it, we use Spark Streaming. If you want to apply machine learning algorithms, you need to be familiar with a package called MLlib, and there are other packages also like GraphX, etc. Okay. So let me go to the Spark documentation and try to explain uh, 1 minute, okay, and try to explain what is this transformations and actions. Okay, so here I am going to Spark 1.6.2 documentation, and if you go to programming guide, okay, so you have the Spark programming guide here, and then you have different modules available here like data frames, MLlib, GraphX, Bagel, Sparker, etc. So if you want to go to the individual modules, you can choose one of these things. But to understand the core Spark APIs, you have to go to Spark programming guide. Once you know Scala or Python, which are programming languages, you have to focus on this section, transformations as well as actions. These two are the foundation for the entire Spark, and there are around 30 APIs. Okay, one category is transformations and other category is actions. I don't want to get into details what is transformation, what is action, etc. at this time, but I will throw you some material for your reference which you can follow and can learn beyond this session as well as beyond Data Fest. The content will be available for you, available to you for free on our platforms, and I will show you how to access that. Okay, so once you know programming, you have to understand these transformations and actions if you are serious about Spark. Without programming language, if you directly get into this, it will not make any sense to you. Okay, that being said, let me do the demo. Okay, and the content which you can use to learn is primarily on YouTube, and this is the link, youtube.com/itversity, or you can also search for itversity in YouTube and it will take to my channel. Okay, and here if you go to my channel, there are a bunch of playlists. Okay, if you just want to learn Scala and Spark, this is the latest playlist, Scala and Spark workshop, where there are 7 videos and each video is more than 3 hours. So it's almost like 21, it's approximately 23 hours content. Okay, and it covers Scala. So the first 2 videos will cover Scala, and then the rest of the 5 videos will primarily cover core Spark and Spark SQL. I haven't covered Spark MLlib as part of this, but I have covered Spark streaming, I have covered Spark SQL, and also I have covered transformations and actions. Okay, and if you want to practice while going through this content, actually this content will help you to set up this Scala development environment on your laptop and then start developing the programs. So you need to have either IntelliJ or Eclipse to develop your programs. So here I am using IntelliJ, which is nothing but a IDE. Okay, where you can develop Java programs or Scala programs. In this case, I have IntelliJ with Scala plugin, which can be used to develop. Don't worry, I will not develop now, but I just want to show you how the development typically works. Okay, so here we have okay, let me log into the lab. And the way you can access, so if you need environment to practice, we have a cloud-based product called labs.itversity.com, and this is the only paid product on our platform as of today. And if you need access to this, you have to pay $15 for 31 days, $35 for 93 days, and $55 for 185 days. Once you sign up and once you make the payment, then you will get access to the lab instantaneously. It will not take too much of time, and there is no manual dependency. Okay, once you made the payment and once you log in, you will get credentials to the lab. Okay, so either you can use PuTTY or Terminal if you are using Mac or Linux, or for Windows you use PuTTY. For Mac or Linux you can use Terminal. And also you can actually click on this open console, and it can open the console in the browser itself, and then you can copy the username from here and paste it. If you are using Windows, make sure you use Shift Insert. Okay, because Control V will not work in this application. Okay, now I'm in the lab. Okay, and we have access to a MySQL database, and you can access that database by using this command mysql-u retail_dba and then -h and then 01.itversity.com-p. I'm trying to give overview about the data model against which I'm trying to process the data and demonstrate you. Okay, I'm logging into the MySQL database here, and if you switch to a database called retail_db and run show tables, there are 6 tables: categories, customers, departments, order items, orders, and products. Okay, so out of these 6 tables, we can, so if you are familiar with databases and tables, in any application we categorize the tables into transactional tables and master data tables. So transaction tables are the ones which will actually updated in real time whenever transaction happen using an application. So this database actually is a simulator for a online e-commerce platform, and whenever an order is placed, these 2 tables will be updated, orders as well as order items. And if you describe orders, there are 4 fields in this table: order ID, order date, customer ID, and status. And if you describe order items, So orders is the parent table which will capture details at the order level. As part of order, we can have n number of items. In one order, we can place n number of items, right? So for each item, there will be an entry in this order items table. Okay, and here you can see we have order item ID, order item order ID, which is nothing but foreign key to this order ID. And then we have quantity, subtotal, product ID, which will give the details about which type of product we are trying to buy, and the and other details at item level. So let me show you a sample data. Okay, so here I am picking order ID 3. Okay, and this order is placed on 2013 July 25th, and the customer ID who placed this order is 12,011, and it is in complete status. And now if I go to select star from, it will take another 10 minutes. It should not take more than 10 minutes. Order items, limit, sorry, where order item, order ID equal to 3. Okay, 3 is not there in this. Let me say 5. Okay, if you see 5, there are 5 items in to this, and 957 is product ID. And if you want to get the details about each of these products, we can actually go to the products table, and we can get what is the name of the product and other details of the product. Okay, and then this item of product ID 957 has only one quantity, and the price is $299.98. And subtotal is also $299.98, which is nothing but product price multiplied by order item quantity. Okay, and now if you go to the next item, each product is $59.99, but there are 5 quantity, hence the revenue for that item is $299.95. And if you want to get the revenue for the entire orders, we have to add these things, and it will give the revenue for the entire orders, which is order ID 5. Okay, now using this data, let us try to use Spark and get the revenue for each day, um, uh, uh, for each day. Okay, so the way the development lifecycle works is, first you use IDE such as IntelliJ. You should have sample data on your local PC. Okay, and then you have to develop program like this, daily revenue. Okay, and this is Scala based logic. But if you see here, there is something called filter, map, and also reduce by key, sort by key. Okay, so filter and map is primarily to filter the data, and map is to apply some transformation on each record. And then reduce by key is to aggregate the data, sort by key is to sort the data. So again, to understand these APIs, you have to go through my entire course. So I will first you need to develop logic like this, and then build the jar file and take the jar file onto the cluster. Okay, so the cluster either you can access through terminal like this. So this is my Mac terminal, or you can also use browser. So initially, to begin with, you can use browser, but I will highly recommend you to either use PuTTY or some other client, if it is Windows, to connect to the lab rather than using this web console. Okay, so either you can use terminal or web console, and then you can there is a command called Spark submit, and as part of the Spark submit, we have to pass the jar file which is compiled as part of our development effort, and we have to submit the job. Here, instead of using Spark submit, there is something called Spark shell, and I'm using that to run our to demonstrate. Okay, So conf and then spark.uy.port equal to. Don't worry too much about the logic, the commands which I'm running here. You will not be able to understand if you are not familiar with Spark. But this is how you can launch Spark shell on that lab directly, and also you can develop. But typically in production, you will not be doing this. You will develop the program local to your PC using IDEs such as IntelliJ. If it is Python, you use PyCharm or some other Python-based IDE. Once it is developed and well tested locally, then we will take it to the cluster and we will run on the cluster using Spark submit command. Okay, but this is just a lab, and you can use you can log into the lab and directly practice here. There is no harm with that, but in production you should not do this. Okay, so whatever data model I have shown in MySQL, I have copy of that data in HDFS. What is HDFS? HDFS is nothing but file system, which I have covered earlier. And in Spark, if you want to read file system, so here we are trying to read data orders. There is a API called API called text file on top of SC, and here we can give the HDFS path. Okay, so I am giving that path. And now, if you want to validate whether we are able to read the data, we can use something called orders.first or orders.count, which will perform the count, or which will get the first record, and you can see the data format. As we have seen in the database, orders is a 4-field table, and you can see here data is comma separated. Using this information, we have to first split the data using comma as delimiter, and we have to process further. Similar to orders, I am also creating a variable for order items. Okay, you can run order items dot first and see the sample. You can see that it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 field table, and here we are trying to compute revenue for each day, and order date is here, and revenue is here. So what we have to do, we have to join these two on order ID of orders, which is this one, and order item order ID of order items, which is this one. Okay, for that we need to use appropriate transformations. So here I am directly joining the data. First, I am applying map on orders to transform the data, and to join the data, we have to format the data into key value pairs. For orders, the key should be this one, and value should be the order date. Okay, so here what I am doing is, don't worry too much about the syntax and all. I will just type very quickly. Okay, what I will do is I will copy paste, because we are already a little bit behind. So to finish off quickly, I will just copy paste the data. Okay. So first I'm creating a variable called input path, which is nothing but public retail underscore DB. And then I can run this one, and this program will only look for completed and closed orders. We are not interested in cancelled orders to compute the revenue. Okay. Don't worry about what this case class is and all. Unless you are familiar with Scala programming, you will not be able to understand this program in detail. Okay. Okay. So now we are trying to join the data and then trying to compute the revenue. And then finally, I want to see the results. And now you can see that for each day, what is the revenue. Okay, like this, you can process the data. In this case, we just got the raw data into the HDFS, and we ran Scala-based Spark application using Spark APIs to join this data set and generate the revenue for each day. Sometimes we might have to change the data model using data warehousing best practices by denormalizing the tables when we have to do this at a very large scale. In this case, I am just using the same data model in HDFS and trying to process the data. So this is using Scala. And if you want to do it with Python, you can do it with Python also. So instead of Spark shell, I can say PySpark. Okay, and it will launch the command line interface or REPL with Spark with Python as context. Earlier, it launched with Scala as context when I run Spark shell. Okay, and here also I will try to copy paste the code, and the code is available in my GitHub account for Python. Okay, first I'm creating RDD for orders. So Scala and Python are strikingly similar programming languages. Okay, when it comes to data processing, if you learn Scala, you will be able to learn Python also very quickly. So you should master at least one of them. If you know both, it's well and good. But when it comes to Spark, you have to master at least one of Scala or Python. You can use Spark as part of Java also, but it is not very popular to use Java for Spark-based application development. Okay. So public retail underscore DB orders. Okay, now we can just process the data. Okay, now I'm joining both of them, and then this will actually compute the revenue for each day. Okay, and if you guys need my GitHub account details, especially with respect to Python, I'm pasting the link in the chat. Okay, and you can get it directly from there, these code snippets. Okay, and then per in, revenue per order per
Durga,
day.
you send the link to only panelists instead of everyone.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. So how to send it to everyone? Can you take care of it?
I'll do that. Also, there is a question which a person has asked, that what is the size of the data set which you are using, and why to do it in Spark versus let's say a laptop which they might be having.
So the data set is not very big for this one, but when you actually go through my content, even though I demonstrate on a very smaller data set, because as part of the learning practice, I believe this. So if you want to swim in English Channel, you cannot go to English Channel and practice every day. You have to practice in swimming pool, but that swimming pool has to be a little bit realistic to English Channel. If you these days you can simulate the flooding as part of your swimming pool, and you can practice against it, and it will make you better at swimming, and you will be prepared to swim in the English Channel. So even though the data volume is very low, if you start practicing on the lab, which is a 7-node cluster, you will you will be more confident in facing with larger data set. And you have to go through my content on the YouTube, where I start with a very smaller data set, because when it comes to smaller data sets, validating the results and all those things will be straightforward, and you will not waste a lot of time unnecessarily. Okay, and then once you understand basics of programming and also writing simple programs on smaller data set, I have covered there are few videos with respect to performance tuning also, not in this playlist but in some other playlist, where I have demonstrated on processing huge amounts of data, and try to use the cluster in more sophisticated manner. So to answer the question, if you want to practice on your laptop, well and good. Functionally, you can practice uh, on the dataset which I am using. If you send email, I will send you the details about how to set up on your laptop also. But if you want to understand how it works in actual cluster, it will be better to use either my lab, or if you have a environment already available as part of your job, you can use that environment. Running on the laptop itself will not get you the actual feel. Okay, this dataset is very small. It's only 3 megabytes or something. It's not a very big dataset, but functionally it is very efficient to develop programs against it, to validate, and all those things.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah, so that is about demo. I have demonstrated both in Scala and Python. Both are very so they require a little bit of learning curve, but you have to learn. Okay, and now let us understand what it takes to learn Spark. So programming, if I have to give weightage, programming is 30%, which is the highest weightage, and then Spark APIs is only 10%, and SQL is 10%. Scoop is 5%. Scoop is losing its steam. Flume and Kafka is 15%, especially when it comes to streaming analytics. You should have hands-on exposure to Flume and Kafka. And then miscellaneous. When I say miscellaneous, the overhead overhead is rest of the stuff. So this covers 80%. The miscellaneous means the other tools on top of these things. To be to be a big data engineer comes under 10%. Whatever other tools which we have seen falls in this miscellaneous category. And this is primarily for the big data engineer. If it is data scientist, it's a different story. Data science algorithms and R programming, all those things take a lot more weightage compared to these things. In this slide, I am only concentrating on big data engineer roles who want to get expertise in Spark. When it comes to data science, this is completely different. Unfortunately, I don't have slide for the data scientist at this time. In future, I will try to create. But I can tell you that if you, as a data scientist, if you want to learn Spark, probably Spark, the entire Spark, including the Scala or Python programming languages, will be probably 30%, 40 or 50% will be data science algorithms and all, and then 20% the other overhead. And if you want to learn Spark, start with programming, understand APIs, learn SQL, learn Flume and Kafka along with Spark streaming, and then keep adding other skills. And eventually, you will try to have deep understanding about the Spark within the big data ecosystem. Okay, demo is already taken care. Demo is given on labs.itversity.com. I have demonstrated both Scala and Python, using both Scala and Python. I have used HDFS as file system to get the data. I have used Spark to process the data. And in both the cases, when I run the job, I actually use Yarn as the framework. Unfortunately, it got disconnected. Let me do this. I'm trying to connect to lab again. And when I run the Spark shell command, I use master yarn, okay, which means that I'm trying to run in the yarn context. If it is Mesos, which is another popular Spark framework, Spark execution framework, which means that whatever Spark applications you are running, it will be running in this context. If it is Mesos, the syntax will be a little bit different here. Apart from this, rest of the stuff is same. Okay, so I have used Yarn as execution framework, and I have given the demo. And now I am open to take any questions.
Sure. So I'll compile the questions for you, Durga. And given that we are kind of at 11:20, so let's take a few questions and kind of wrap it up by 11:30. So the first question is, I think so people were kind of questioning on the languages. So is Scala must to learn Python, or is Java enough, or is Python enough as well?
So I will. So when it comes to data processing, there is a reason why tools like Informatica, Tailend, DataStage, etc., gained momentum around a decade back. At the time, the programming language which is in use predominantly is Java, and there are C, C++ also, but Java actually became mainstream, and C, C++ and other programming languages are kind of least preferred for application development compared to Java. So when at the time when people want to do the data processing, for example, whatever program I have developed, okay, so this program, what it is doing, it is actually getting data from multiple directories, and I am joining both the data sets, and then I'm aggregating to get the results. Okay, if I have to develop this program using Java, it takes at least 400-500 lines of code, and it can be buggy. So that's the reason why tools like Informatica, DataStage became more popular when it comes to data processing. There are standard set of transformations which needs to be done, and Informatica, DataStage provide RDE, rapid development environment, which tend to provide you a graphical user interface where you can drag and drop, and you can develop the mappings and submit it as part of your workflow. Now, comparing writing in Java and then using Power Designer of Informatica or any other ETL tool, RDE of any ETL tool, it is only 10% or 5% of development effort. When it comes to Scala or Python, you can see this. It's just 6 or 7 lines of code to join two data sets and then aggregate it, right? Now, if you compare with Informatica or any RDE against the programming languages like Python, Scala, etc., the effort is almost same, and you have much better control over the logic using programming languages. That's why Scala and Python are getting more and more popular as part of data processing. Okay, so when it comes to data processing within big data ecosystem, I do not recommend you to explore Java. You can put the Java in the back burner. And between Scala and Python, right? Even traditional ETL. I just spoke to my cousin today. She works for Amazon. Okay, and they are replacing a project which was developed using some technology into Python. They are trying to develop the entire ETL as part of the Python itself. Okay, so now Python is becoming de facto standard when it comes to data processing programming, whether it is big data or traditional ETL. Python is gaining a lot of momentum. Either you can learn Scala or Python, both are strikingly similar programming languages when it comes to data processing. When it comes to Spark, Scala is more preferred because Spark itself is developed in Scala, so the integration between Scala and Spark is much better compared to any other programming language. But Python is more prominent in data processing in general. So you have to learn one language for sure. You have to master it from data processing perspective. You need to understand collections. You need to understand the APIs around the collections. You need to understand file system APIs and all those things in depth in one programming language, and you can easily adapt to the other programming language if the situation demands. So it's up to you whether you want to go with Python or Scala. But as most of you probably from data science background, or you might be exploring data science, I would recommend to go with Python than Scala. If you want to become a pure Spark based data engineer, I will recommend Scala as a programming language.
Sure. Thanks, Durga, for that answer. Another question, which is which a couple of people have asked, is in the ecosystem which you showed, where do Pig and Hive fit in that ecosystem?
Okay. Yeah. So when it comes, yeah. So this is the ecosystem, right? So as part of data processing, I told batch, real time, as well as streaming. So if I go back to the slide, okay. So here I told MapReduce and Spark for batch data processing. Hive and Pig are nothing but MapReduce based tools. Okay, when you run Hive query, which is nothing but SQL, it compile into MapReduce program, and it will be submitted as MapReduce application. Okay, so when I say MapReduce here, it include Hive and Pig as well as part of batch data processing.
Sure.
But don't worry too much about Pig. After success of Scala and Python, no one want to use Pig. Pig is almost irrelevant today, and it will be completely irrelevant within a year or two. So don't waste your time on Pig unless you have to reverse engineer the existing Pig application and redevelop using better programming languages like Scala or Python. When it comes to Hive, even though we say Spark SQL, okay, the syntax of writing Spark SQL queries are similar to Hive, but the execution is different. So when I run a query, if I run in MapReduce context using Hive, it will compile into MapReduce job. When I use Spark SQL and submit Hive query, it will run as Spark job. Okay, so if you already know Hive, you know Spark SQL. But using Hive, you cannot develop a complete application. You have to use those Hive queries as part of bigger application scope or bigger application development lifecycle, and you should be able to use SQL wherever it can, which include Hive or Spark.
Sure.
Okay, there is a misconception. Let me finish with this statement. There is a misconception that if you know Hive, you can get a big data job. that is completely false, and people are being cheated big time using that kind of statements. You can never build an application using SQL queries. If you are familiar with typical application development, SQL is part of your very big application development. You would never develop applications purely on SQL. You have to use SQL as part of a programming language or a scripting language, and then you build application on top of it, right? So similarly is the case with big data. Using Hive, you cannot build any application. You can just query the data which is in Hadoop or big data, and if you want to develop applications on top of it, you have to be good at programming. Without programming, you will never be able to become a successful big data engineer or big data developer.
Sure. And the next question is basically from a career perspective in big data. So, from a big data career perspective, should a person focus on Hadoop or Spark? What is your recommendation?
Neither. You should be familiar on big data ecosystem. The underlying technologies might change their terms for a period of time, but as long as you focus at a higher level on big data ecosystem, you will be able to
catch up various things.
You can easily catch up with the technologies. But
sure.
As of today, focus on Spark and learn Spark in depth. Even though someone says that okay, Spark is becoming outdated in next 6 months, still learn Spark. You will understand so many fundamental concepts which will never change. For example, if you know Hive, you already know Spark SQL, right? Similar is the case with anything. So if you learn Spark, even if the underlying technology change, most of the concepts will be with you, and you can easily adapt to the changes in the ecosystem.
Sure. So I'll just take 3 more questions, which are kind of have come up multiple times. So one was that with Spark coming into picture, is there still relevance for ETL tools like Informatica and DataStage? So what impact does Spark bring in the ETL ecosystem?
What is that? Can you repeat that question? Sorry, I lost track of it.
So the person was saying that with Spark coming into picture, is there still relevance for DataStage and Informatica and other similar tools?
So DataStage, Informatica are still relevant when it comes to ETL with traditional architecture. Okay, as of today, with the success of big data, they are hugely impacted, but they are saturated. They cannot go any more further, and it's so the value will not be as much as it was before for those technologies. But at the same time, they are here to stay for some more years. They will not be completely written off in a year or two. They will be there for quite some time.
Then there is a question that is PySpark similar to Pandas data frame, and does it make sense to use data frames through Pandas after getting a Spark handle?
So PySpark is nothing but Python with Spark-based APIs registered with it. So I don't know about Pandas data frame, but most likely they are little bit different. So if you want to develop a Spark-based application using Python, okay, by saying PySpark, you already have all the packages that are required to develop Spark-based applications. Otherwise, you can use regular Python also, but you have to register the binaries related to Spark, and then only you will be able to use Spark. So PySpark is just a convenient tool where all the Spark-related binaries are available, and you can directly start programming using Spark APIs instead of registering the binaries and then start developing.
Sure. So the last question I think which a lot of people have asked is so what would be your recommendation for a person who is either working as a data scientist or aspiring to be a data scientist? How can he or she learn Spark in the most efficient way? So what should be the kind of learning path, or what should be the next steps for them?
Yeah, so if you want to learn Spark as a data scientist, so if you go to this, not this one, if you go to this slide, you have to start with programming. Either Python or Scala is good enough. If you know Python, stick with Python. Don't get into Scala. Understand the APIs. So when I say APIs, if you go to the Spark documentation, okay, and if you go to programming guides, you have Spark programming guide here. Go to Spark programming guide, and you should be comfortable with this. This is the foundation. And I have some content on Python also on my channel, and you can actually go to that and get knowledge up to some level on transformations and actions. Once you know transformations and actions, that is the foundation for learning Spark further. You should know Spark SQL, which include data frames. I have content related to that also. And on top of these things, for data scientists, another important aspect is MLlib, which I'm not very good at, and I don't have any content with respect to MLlib. You have to build those things. But once you know Core Spark, once you start exploring MLlib, it will not take very long time to make sense out of the documentation which is available for MLlib. You need to have good amount of knowledge on the data science algorithms or machine learning algorithms, and also you should be comfortable with Spark. Then if you go to machine learning documentation, you should be able to understand it. You should be able to understand whatever examples they have given very quickly. You just have to go to this and you can get the documentation.
Sure. Thanks, Durga, for that. One last, I think, question, which is so I had thought I'll close it, but it's a very interesting question. That how did you learn all of these tools, and then if you can share any light on your journey, and then we can conclude the session.
Sure. So I typically don't expect much from my peers or from my superiors, and if they need any help or my assistance, I will go ahead and help them uh, without expecting anything. But as part of that process, I will try to build rapport with them, and I spend a good amount of time outside my work also to explore these technologies. But when it comes to even though you read quite a bit of stuff, unless you see some things in action, you will not be able to learn very effectively. For that reason, I help others, and as part of that process, I learn from the others whatever skills they possess, and that's how I built a number of technologies. Today, I can say that I'm good at least 15 to 20 technologies at master level, not at basic level. That is purely because I help others without expecting much, and while helping them, I learn.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Durga, for that wonderful session. I think I think if we look at the last 1 hour, we started with covering real life examples of how LinkedIn and Amazon are using big data infrastructure, and then we've now looked at the demo. So we've covered a lot of material. Thanks a lot for spending that time. I'm sure the community benefited a lot. I myself learned a few things in the session. So thanks a lot for taking time out and taking these questions. The recording of this webinar would be made available to people along with the presentation, so it will be circulated. And for those of you who are participating in the machine learning hackathon, which is so it's starting in 20 minutes. So see you around on the Slack channel shortly. Thanks a lot, Durga.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kunal, for giving me this opportunity. And thank you very much for those who actually joined the session. And you can always contact me through my email or on any social networking platform, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. LinkedIn and Facebook, I'm very active. So you can follow me on one of those platforms. Thank you. Bye.